for the first time in human history, more people are dying of overeating than not having enough food. So why is it so hard, do you think, in the modern world to actually be healthy?
Food has become way cheaper for the average person to buy and way tastier and way more convenient. How is not everyone obese?
When you look at things like the body positive movement, big is beautiful, you know, you can be beautiful at any size, you're like,
I have a lot to say about that, actually. The reason why people who become obese haven't reduced their obesity. There are many, many reasons. The vast majority of it is the giving a factor is just real low.
Mike, welcome to TRIGGERnometry.
Thank you for having me, guys. I'm a huge fan of the show, so this is like very surreal. And I typically don't get very nervous anymore. I've been doing a few of these every now and again, but like I'm actually like palpably anxious.
Yeah, well, if I was in front of two physical specimens like us, I'd be intimidated as well.
I'm actually also aroused. That's the other part.
well, that's why we've got a table there.
That's exactly right. There, keep you away from us. Well, listen, man, it's great to have you on the show. You obviously talk about health and fitness and something that's interesting, especially in the modern world. You know, I think the stat just came out that for the first time in human history, more people are dying of overeating than not having enough food. So why is it so hard, do you think, in the modern world to actually be healthy and be a reasonable weight? Because you see those pictures of Americans in the 1980s on the beach and now, two very different pictures, right?
Yes, absolutely. I have a view on this that some people think is contentious. I think it's very data-driven, and I think I'm right. An egotistical statement to start off with. But all jokes aside, I think it's really just only one core variable that describes all of this, and that is ratioed to income in terms of hours worked terms. Like, you guys familiar with time cost in economics? Like, how many hours of work do I have to put in to afford a glass or a jacket or a car? And that's the best way to think of purchasing power because it takes care of all the inflation money stuff just completely aside. So the time cost for the average human, especially in the modern developed world where most of the obesity epidemic is the most serious, to be able to afford a certain amount of calories has shrunk a ton. And so at the same time, the convenience of the food has exponentially accelerated, and the taste quality of the food has accelerated. Like, you fellas, am I allowed to swear in here? Not so much?
Absolutely.
You're allowed to say whatever you want.
Tastes incredible when you go to the store or to restaurants. And the idea that food tastes incredible is something that everyone who's in the food manufacturing business takes as almost like a prior that doesn't even get articulated. Like, if someone was like, oh, so you have this food you're making and it's healthy, but it doesn't taste good, right? They're gonna be like, well, no, hold on. Of course it tastes good. Well, that's the core metric, because if food doesn't taste good, people just don't eat it very often. Very conscientious, health-conscious people will, drink kale juice or whatever the hell. It's really tough to force that on most people.
My wife tries on me, though.
Go. A little spoon and everything. So as we've become so much wealthier as a society, and especially the average, especially lower middle income folks, and in lower middle income countries, for example, Mexico. It used to be, I didn't mean to look at you, you're Venezuelan, but, same part of the world.
Same thing.
Spanish speaking. Mexico.
Well, in America, anyone who speaks Spanish is Mexican.
100%.
Irrespective of which part of the world they actually come from.
On the demography, it's not like Hispanic/Latino, it's just Mexican. I look around like, God damn it, all right, fine, close enough. So Mexico, we used to think of back in the 90s as like a poorer country, And then now Mexico actually, the average person in Mexico is wealthier than the average person in the United States was in the 1960s, like per purchasing power. And so you think about like, okay, so Mexico's not a poor country anymore. How is their obesity rate doing? Disastrous. It's insanely high. They are leaving almost everyone behind. Why? Because their people can finally afford all the food they want. Food is ubiquitously available, and it is incredibly tasty and super convenient. Like, if you go to like a Costco or a Sam's Club, do you guys have that sort of thing back in the kingdom? It's a magical capitalism store, and you get like a pre-made rotisserie chicken. When it's cooked and it's warm, you simply just do this, and for $5, it's yours. There is no equivalent of that in history. There's no metric by which we can even start to measure that sort of thing. So once we understand that food has become way cheaper for the average person to buy, and way tastier and way more convenient, we look at obesity and we start to have to ask a different question. How is not everyone obese? Because if you get people enough calories and food, it tastes good, there's a crap load of scientific data on this. When something tastes delicious, people just kind of keep eating it. And your idea of what full or empty feels in your stomach kind of gets a little hazy. If I gave you a plate of fresh broccoli and I was like, all right, fellas, dig in, you'd be like, okay, crunch, crunch, crunch. I'm done. If I gave you some really good like potato chips or something, you would be like, oh, there's nothing else going on. And the whole thing is done. So when you do that to most foods, fast foods, convenience foods, anything you can get at like a 7-Eleven or anything like that, and in general, even fine dining is more and more affordable for more people. And it's getting super cheap all the time. People love to eat tasty food. We've done a ton of analysis on, okay, are people less physically active? The answer is yes, but not by nearly an amount of physical activity decrement that would explain this much weight gain. Like just people used to maybe run a marathon every day and then they stopped. That's actually not true. Cross-culturally and across societies, physical activity levels are actually really stable between people. Believe it or not, the average American moves almost as much as the average African, like goat herder. When you talk about all of the metabolic functions required to keep the body going, the out part of the equation versus the in part, it's really similar. Theirs is a little higher, but not enough to explain why the American weighs 350 pounds, or as I call it, 1 Texan unit, and why folks in Africa weigh substantially less. And the answer, almost certainly, the major part of the answer, I would say 80 or 90%, is the ubiquitous availability of ultra cheap, ultra delicious food.
That's so interesting, man. It's a really interesting way of breaking it. You're basically saying when normal people have access to as much access to food as Henry VIII, we're all going to look like Henry VIII.
More by a long shot. Yeah. I mean, think about like Uber Eats and Grubhub. Magic. Try to describe that to someone from 1900. Yeah. Just like show them a video. The video part's going to be confusing to begin with because they're like, what's the magic? We're like, it's a magic portal to the future. And then just a regular person, ordering on Grubhub and then it shows up. They'll be like, what's going on? We see it kind of whatever you want just shows up to your door. Any kind of food. And you're like, okay. They're like, so this person must be someone who is like avant-garde, like one of the leaders or something. Like this person, it works a menial labor job. Like, what? So what do the wealthy eat? Like they eat kind of slightly different stuff, but everyone kind of does Uber Eats. There's not like, if you walk around, you can't really tell who's richer or poor anymore much, because there's that new rich guy swag where you try to purposefully look poor. The whole world is kind of upside down, reference to history. So yes, the Henry VIII thing is 100% accurate, but even more than that, because, like imagine how much Thai food English kings of old had. None, I suppose, almost none. How do you resist modern Thai food? It's like $8 for like the greatest food you've ever had, and it's just always more of it. You just hit the Uber Eats button again, and half an hour later, $16 worth more food comes in. How do you fight that? I have an answer to how to fight it, but it is a very, very difficult thing.
How much of it as well is, it's, yes, cheap food, tasty food, but it's also unhealthy food as well. Is that part of the dynamic here, or is that exaggerated in your opinion?
Exaggerated highly. Really? Very highly. Because
I know, sorry to interrupt, we have a friend who's actually a former guest on the show, Dominic Frisby, he's a comedian, and he was never like Texan unit size, but he was, he was a bigger guy, and he cut out seed oils and suddenly he's super slim. That's his answer, right? So a lot of people think there's like a hack. If you stop eating X, then you're going to do Y. But you don't think that's really as big a deal as people make out?
The evidence shows that that's clearly not the case. In randomized control trials, seed oils do better than saturated fats in almost all health metrics. They just do. Like most seed oils are healthier for you than like butter and lard, straight up. I don't like how that feels. I don't love the vibe. But it's just what, like, if you look at all the data, it's just what the aggregate of the data shows.
That's fascinating.
That being the case, there are some things that aren't super healthy. Various kinds of preservatives, like the 7-Eleven rotating hot dog situation where you go in there and it's just the grill that, like, how long has that been there? Like, it doesn't matter. It never goes bad. You're like, the hell is it made of then? That stuff isn't great for you, and it will degrade your health markers a little bit. But there's not any magical way in which that's obesogenic, in the sense that there's not any magical way in which unhealthy food makes you fatter than healthy food. The critical ingredient the critical metric for what makes you fat or not is calories.
Right.
And if you can smash a lot of healthy calories in, you're still gaining that weight, which is a big myth that, like, forgive me for getting racial, rich ass white people have this thing where they're like, I'm such a good person, I love nature, I voted for all the right people, and they go to Whole Foods. No offense, Whole Foods is great. But they like think, okay, I'm inside of a Whole Foods. I don't have to deal with the other muck out there, these Trump supporters or whatever. I didn't mean to look at you again. How dare you? And they're like, anything in the Whole Foods store, because it's got all the right labels, right? It's organic, it's vegan, it's free range. The chickens like own a cooperative somehow and slaughter each other. It's great, right? And you're like, everything I put into my body here is going to be good for me. But then, like, I always tell the same story. I used to buy these like mega size vegan brownies. Like, you know, there's like a brownie and then there's like Hulk version of brownie and there's like Galactus brownie. It was like that. And the thing had like 1,000 fucking calories in it.
Wow.
But it was made of all the right stuff. No seed oils. It was like some kind of awesome healthy fats, plants only. The shit tasted like heroin if you could eat it. And of course, people are munching these down and are like stepping on the scale and they're like, they're still heavy. So the idea that if you just eat healthy food, you'll all of a sudden lose weight and get much healthier is illusory. However, if you eat minimally processed foods that aren't like the tastiest thing you can jam into your mouth every time you sit down to eat, there's just only so many calories you can put in. I put a plate of salmon, brown rice, and broccoli in front of you. What you gonna do? Order seconds? You're gonna do that. You're gonna pick at it. You're gonna eat some. You're gonna be like, I'm good. I put a plate of cheeseburgers from McDonald's in front of you. They're gone. And all of a sudden, it's like double the calories you're taking in. So it's not the fact that the food is healthy, but minimally processed food that tends to be healthier, which is very good for the health part, not just the weight part, although the weight's the most important part of health. It's not the only thing. The biggest power those foods have for weight control is that you're just probably not going to overeat them. I mean, imagine seeing someone in your office as an obesity doctor, and they're like, Doc, I can't lose weight. They're like, what is it? Like, fresh green apples, man. I just can't stop eating them. It just doesn't happen. Hyper palatable foods, which often, in order to be convenient, they have to be shelf stable. And that means they do have some preservatives in there that aren't great for you, but we're talking about single percentage points compared to 90 percentage points for just eating more physical stuff that has calories in it.
And Mike, people talk a lot about the effect of sugar, and sugar has become this kind of catch-all for evil in the world of food.
Yes.
And we've even got a term, big sugar, which sounds like you're like a larger lady. You know, you like a bit of big sugar.
That's what she is in your phone. You're scrolling, who's tonight's date? Big sugar.
Yeah.
I need more woman tonight.
Yeah, it's 10 o'clock on a Sunday evening, time for big sugar. But how bad is sugar for you? And do we overstate it, or do we in fact underestimate it?
Yeah, it's greatly overstated, greatly, profoundly. So you feel free to call her tonight. You're good. Hey, baby, good news. You're not bad for my health. Sugar has an ability to ramp your calories up way beyond what you need, and then you start gaining weight. For one reason only, it's really tasty. You put sugar into a lot of foods, it makes them tastier. People like sweet things. Chemically, molecularly, there are many different kinds of sugar. Some of them digest more rapidly, some less rapidly. Some have certain very small differences in appetite regulation effects, but on the aggregate, different kinds of sugars just don't matter much. So if you had a diet that had enough fiber, enough protein, enough vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, all that stuff, really good healthy food, most of your food was healthy, and then you had a band of like 400 extra calories that came up to maintenance. And if you ate 400 less, you would lose weight. You don't want to lose weight, you're already healthy. If you fill that extra 400 with protein or with fat, or with sugar, or any other kind of carbs, it almost doesn't matter. It doesn't matter for weight control at all, and it almost doesn't matter for any other health variable. So when people are looking at drinks and it says, you know, for example, no sugar added, like that's dope, but how does that reflect the calorie number? Because sometimes people say like natural sugars, and they're like, oh, see, natural sugar cane, like that is damn near the same sugar. It has the same calories, gives people that illusory thing. So when people are trying to make their diets healthier, cutting out sugar as a way to reduce calories, brilliant. Because like, there's a lot of extra sugar and stuff. It really is. It's because people like extra sugar because it tastes good. So if you can cut down the sugar without adding in something else for calories, you're winning. If you just keep the calories the same, you're like less sugar, but now there's more fat, maybe there's more other carbohydrates that aren't exactly sugar, you're just going pretty much nowhere. And it's the grand illusion of like, I'm doing well for myself, except nothing's happening whatsoever.
A friend of mine's father was one of the original guys. I think this was 20 odd years ago in the longevity space. He was a doctor. And I remember him saying to me, I had a can of Diet Coke. And he said, don't ever drink that. He goes, if you want to drink Coke, drink Coke.
Yeah.
You know, I'll go, but sugar. He was like, it's better that you have natural sugar than you have all the chemicals and everything artificial contained in that Diet Coke. Would you agree with that analysis?
I mean, like, I don't want to disparage your friend's dad.
Yeah.
But he's wrong.
I had a really, you guys are British, you do dark humor. Right?
Yes.
I was gonna, it'd be funny if you were like, my friend's dad in the longevity space, sadly no longer with us. But I would say that's actually like sort of the most backwards wrong advice that you could give on that topic. Artificial sweeteners, as they're called, technically they're called non-nutritive sweeteners. Almost all of them, and the ones that used to be sort of not so great for health are really kind of not in use anymore, like aspartame is still around, but kind of falling off. Sucralose is the new thing. New, it's not that new, but it's actually kind of more modern than the other ones. Modern non-nutritive sweeteners, artificial sweeteners, have almost no effect on your health one way or another. They're not good for your health. They don't really do anything. But if you are trying to prove a point that they're bad for your health and you're going solely off objective discussion of literature, you're going absolutely nowhere. The other argument of saying they're neutral for health and you can have tons of them has like hundreds of studies, almost unanimous studies of empirical support. If you're looking for something more cut and dry in the nutritional literature than the statement non-nutritive sweeteners are generally well tolerated by most people and have very few, if any, negative effects, that statement might not exist. Like, it's that solid of a foundation. So when people, now, on the other hand, excess sugar that boosts up calories, like if you're drinking Cokes all day, some people don't even count that into their food. And right, like each can has like 160 calories, and that shit adds up. 500 extra calories per day, you gain roughly a pound of fat a week. That's like 3 or 4 cans of soda. If you just drink soda and then you do anything else to your diet except you switch to diet, you can, and many hundreds of thousands of people do this all the time, you can lose pounds and pounds of weight per month for months on end, radically improving your health and body composition. So yeah, I would say one of the best pieces of advice I can give people listening to this is anytime you want soda, go with diet. I would just say in most circumstances for normal folks just trying to figure this shit out, not trying to become experts, regular sugar, full sugar soda is just a do not consume item. I would just be like, nope, put it next to the Drano. You know, every Friday night you need to clear yourself out, fine. But diet soda is like orders of magnitude healthier and safer for you long term than regular full sugar soda. It's just not even close.
And I'm glad we're talking about safer in the long term because, you know, I don't think we're honest enough actually about the effects that obesity has on the human body. You know, when you look at things like the body positive movement, big is beautiful, you know, you can be beautiful at any size, you're like,
I have a lot to say about that, actually. I don't want to derail the conversation, but that's a new intellectual sphere I've been entering for a while, is the body image sphere and how people see themselves and how body positivity comes into that. I don't want to say too much about that, but I can give a little bit of a glow. I don't know if you guys want to talk about that shit.
Anything
to we have a whole list of
anything
things.
to trigger fat people.
So, yeah,
no,
exactly.
You know what I mean. Look, the thing for us is, I'm joking, obviously, but the thing, as you know, because you watch the show, we try and do is we try and talk honestly about the things that people don't talk honestly about because they're all afraid, right? Yes. And I think when it comes to obesity, for the reasons that you're talking about, we've got to start actually challenging narratives that are false. That doesn't mean we have to be nasty to people or demean people, but I think there has been a lot of lies, and I don't even know what they are, where people are being told things to make them feel better about doing things that make them feel worse in reality.
I have 2 lies I'd love to chat with you guys.
Go on, let's do it.
Lie number 1 is that obesity is either exaggerated as a cause for poor health, or some slightly less hinged people will say that it doesn't have anything to do with health causatively. It's just about as false as anything you could say. Obesity, especially in longer term, several years plus, and exponentially more bad for your health the longer you continue to be obese, and exponentially worse for your health the more obese you become, Obesity is insanely deleterious to your body, to your quality of life, to your longevity, even to your psychology as it interacts with your physiology. You literally feel worse if you're obese, not just from psychological stuff, where people frown at you because you look bad or something, though that does also happen, just from the physiological feedback mechanisms. You feel worse, you are more at risk for a variety of diseases, you heal less well from any kind of injuries or surgeries or anything like that. Being obese, if you had to tell someone, like if I was in an elevator with you fine gentlemen, and I was like trying to pitch you guys, like, hey, I'd love to be on your show, I want to talk about how bad obesity is. And you're like, all right, like 20 seconds. You guys, I'm sure, are quite wealthy. You live on the 110th floor or something, so we're riding down. And you're like, it's 20 seconds, tell us what obesity is, what's bad about obesity physiologically. It would be an intractable problem because the list is like hundreds of things long. It's like almost any disease condition you can think of is radically made worse by having obesity. And it causes like at least 10 major disease conditions. Diabetes. They have actually a thing called metabolic syndrome, which is 5 of those conditions wrapped up. Poor blood lipids, arterial clogging. I mean, it's like, if you're trying not to be around for a long time, getting obese, very dependable way to do it. So that's one big lie. The idea that like, hey, it's okay if you're obese because the medical community's racist or sexist. They never can get their kind of understanding. Fat phobia. That's right. Sorry. Fearing fat people. I had the phobia part. So that's lie number 1. Lie number 2 is a little bit lower key, but in some way even more insidious. And it hits me on a personal level. And the lie is almost the entire summation of the body positivity movement. And the lie is this, that you can be just as beautiful if you're morbidly obese as you can be if you're any other shape or size, maybe a more conventional shape or size. I didn't mean to look at you, though your body's quite stunning. It's a little distracting. I'm just kind of. So here's the thing. To their credit, to these folks who are in the body positivity movement, kind of promulgators of it, is there anything right with people getting rude comments because they're fat? No, that's toxic and insane. That's not how adult people interact with each other. Is bullying children by other children okay because those children are fat? Like, it's terrible, and that should be heavily punished, discouraged, and people should talk to children. But you don't do things like that. And are people in all bodies fundamentally beautiful, wonderful human souls? Categorically, yes. Value as a grand understanding has nothing to do with how you look or how fat you are, how skinny you are. That's ridiculous. It's like an 8-year-old's understanding of the world. On the other hand, is it true to say that other people will find you as attractive and appealing if you're morbidly obese? Is not. No. And if they tell you that, they're one of 2 things. The rare, though commendable, fat fetishists, my people, or Patreon link below, or people who are lying, mostly in order to appear nice, but they're lying to you. Here's the biggest. Fuck all those people. Fuck everyone else. What about you? Here's my biggest take from this. Fat people themselves don't think fat is beautiful 97 times out of 100. And so when you tell them, oh, fat is beautiful, they want to believe it, but they don't believe it. Imagine a world in which you took a very, very obese person and aliens come down and they're like, so we gave everyone a mind virus? They actually just find obese people insanely attractive now. You're walking down the street, everyone's like, people are hollering at you, what the fuck? Like construction workers are taking their clothes off. What the hell's going on? And then you come home and you look at your body. Do you love your body now? Is it that simple that socialization can flip that switch? Or even after a few months or a few weeks of being inundated with compliments, do you love your body? My contention is the answers are mostly no. Because how we assess bodies is mostly engineered into us via evolution from mechanisms that are real simple pattern detectors in our visual field. And if you are a certain shape, you're going to like your own shape in the mirror. If you are another shape, say grotesquely overweight, you're not going to like it most times. And when people lie to you and say fat is beautiful, body positivity, you're not really going to believe it. And also those people don't really believe it either. So when we're telling people, hey, body positivity is great, fat is beautiful, why are we doing that? And I know why. It's so that fatter people can feel okay and not terrible. Well, fuck, that's a commendable reason. I think that's awesome. And so I think we can simultaneously work as a society, though you guys know enough economics to know that multiple components of the society, not all of them agree, but most people can work on at the same time welcoming everyone, every gender, every race, every sexual orientation, you know what I'm saying, trans people, leadership people, Muslim people, get them all in, fat people, love everyone. Maybe not love, because my parole officer keeps saying you can't physically just start loving people in the street, Mike, again. Everyone should be treated with a fundamental degree of respect and acceptance. And we can also say, some people are found more physically attractive on average than others. We don't have to mix those two, ever. Like, if I walk up to I'm married, my wife's sitting over there, so I gotta be really careful what I say. She gets violent. I'm just kidding, she stays violent. So I walk up to a 5'11" model in New York, and I'm like, my best line's like, hey baby, what do you think? If she's like, you're a little short, I'm not gonna be like, in my best self, I'm not going to be like, the height oppression continues, like years, and Marx talked about this. I'm going to be like, I don't think she hates me deep down as a human, but I just think she's not into short guys. And that's all right. I'm 5'6", shit happens. And when you're very overweight, you look a certain way that neither you nor most other people find ideally attractive from a physical porking perspective. All right. But like, there's so many other utilities for people other than like being in Victoria's Secret ads. Like, they're like, we need to get more obese models. Like, why? So they can also have cocaine addictions and crises of meaning at age 22? Like, is that really the pinnacle? So I think us admitting, look, most people want to look a certain way. And that certain way is like, some more muscular than others, some fatter than others. But most people have an understanding, like Matt Damon type of shit. Like just looking like a normal dude, a little bit of abs, maybe the Brad Pitt from Fight Club look. That's kind of the normal distribution about look preferences, that's the center. And it's not a very wide distribution. We can have that and admit that to ourselves, while at the same time saying, look, a lot of people just don't look like that. And the next question is like, hey, do you want to look better? And they're like, well, yeah, let's figure out how to leverage science, coaching, software, and pharmaceutical technologies, which I'm huge on, in order to get your version of you right now physically into a package that looks more like what you want to look like and what everyone else seems to find handy dandy. And I think that honesty, which you guys are very famous for on this show, like I get some not so nice feedback on it, but here's the thing, it's fucking true. There's this whole movement called Health at Every Size, HAES, and the fraction of that movement's waves in the water has like shrunk by a factor of 10 ever since the modern obesity drugs came out. Ozempic and tirzepatide and Mounjaro, whatever, they came out. And a bunch of those people kind of look around like, there's a pill I can take, a shot I can take, there's no longer babies. And they just don't come to next week's meeting of fat people, Because at the end of the day, most of those people don't want to be fat. It would be very, very different if people who are overweight, as a majority of them, really loved their look and how they feel in their health. And everyone was like, you look like you need to change it. What? No, that's ridiculous. Stop doing that. But they don't. Most overweight people do not want to be overweight. And most other people also don't fancy the overweight as much. And so there's actually no mystery. The only, not mystery, but discordance is some group of people, on the political left, academia, people I think mostly are very good people, just trying to do right, and everyone else is bullying them to saying the shit. They're like, yeah, fat is beautiful. They say shit like that. I think it just lends just more confusion, because at the end of the day, nobody really believes it. There's this funny meme going around online, a little joke. Like your super hot girlfriend and her super hot friends are like, oh my God, Lizzo's beautiful. And then you're like, hey, you look like Lizzo today. And she's going like, what the fuck? And why the discordance? I thought she was beautiful. And then that girl, if you sit her down, if you're like, to try to forget sociology at Harvard your last year, is Lizzo beautiful? As a human and a fucking rock star, queen energy times 100. Lizzo's a goddess. The rest of us are just in her wake. But as a person of body composition you want to attain in order to attract the highest number of mates, and much more importantly, look in the mirror and be like, yeah, with that, no. And that's okay. And we can be honest about that without coming up to people who look like Lizzo and being like, you're fat, I'm autistic as shit, so I'd probably do something like that. But you know what I mean? There's that massive discordance. I think the body positivity movement comes from all the right perspectives, but ends up doing a disservice because it's trying to wash away fucking literal reality of the fact that, again, most fatter people do not want to be fat.
We'll be back with our guest in a minute. But first, in our recent interview with Dr. Peter Attia, we explored the science of longevity. He explained that aging isn't just about adding years to your life, it's about maintaining quality of life. And that's where NMN comes in. NMN is the molecule that's caught the attention of top researchers, including Harvard's Dr. David Sinclair. Millions of users report improved energy, better sleep, and even weight loss. It targets the root causes of aging, helping you stay vibrant and active well into your later years. What makes Alpha Cell Labs Pure NMN supplement the best choice? For starters, they've the highest rated NMN company in the world on Trustpilot. They also pack their products in glass bottles. No cheap plastics here, minimizing microplastic contamination and keeping every dose pure and fresh. And they're all about transparency. Every batch is independently tested for purity and posted online for you to see. Just listen to thousands of customers who've made NMN their go-to supplement for longevity. Visit alphacell-labs.com or scan the QR code on your screen. Use our exclusive code TRIG20 for 20% off. That's alphacell-labs.com, code TRIG20. And remember, the 30-day money-back guarantee means you can try it risk-free. Ready to take control of your health and your future? Head to alphacell-labs.com today. And now, back to the interview.
And it's also the long-term implications, which we touched on. So my mother, throughout her entire life, was morbidly obese. And she was like, oh, but I'm fine. And I go for tests and whatever else. And they've told me my blood pressure's fine. So is there a problem? But what people don't seem to understand is the effect that obesity has on your muscular and your skeleton. And so what happens is, my grandfather, who was a doctor, described it as being like hinges on a door. Mm-hmm. And so when you put too much weight on the hinges, what happens, it will come off. And the effect that it has had on her hips and her knees, to the point where she is now physically disabled. And I always found this conversation really frustrating, because I was going to people, you're denying reality.
Yeah.
You're denying reality, and what you're doing is condemning people to an old age where they're sick, and that's awful.
Yeah. It's one of those things that, it's like blood pressure. The real thing with blood pressure is, if your blood pressure is high, almost always you don't feel it. And then, like, wake up one day with high blood pressure and you're like, there's no sensation like that. Mm-hmm. And so if you have high blood pressure, you can have it for years and just be none the wiser. And because you feel fine, you think you're okay. And then, like, 2 years later, they're like, hey, your kidneys are done, bro. You need kidney transplant. And you're like, how? And they're like, what's the blood pressure destroyed all of the little tiny machines in there that do the filtering. That sucks. And so with obesity, a lot of times, two things. First of all, people feel just fine for years, no doubt, like your mom did. Yeah. And then by the time they're in their 60s, still obese, can't move around, weight loss becomes very, very difficult. Mm. And if you lose weight without being very active, you lose a lot of muscle as well. And that's very, very bad for your health. It's one of those things, like, everything's fine until it isn't, Mm-hmm. Like, if you're driving your car and you have no seatbelt on, like, you're fine until you hit a telephone pole, and then you're part of the telephone pole, and that whole fun thing happens. Mm. So that is a big, big deal, because it's really easy to forget that sort of thing. And with obesity, another thing is you feel fine. But because weight typically accumulates slowly, and your brain is really good at adjusting how you feel to all these differences, what ends up happening is, when most people lose lots of weight, they go, oh my God, I feel incredible. And they're like, did I really feel that bad this whole time? Uh-huh. You were just used to it. You guys see very obese people, like, walking around the store, and they're doing one of these, like, they're shuffling. It looks like they're lifting an enormous amount of weight, because they are. It looks like it on their face. They have walkers, they're kind of pushing. And then you see someone of lighter weight just kind of just scamper across. Like, yeah, man. But those people, they get used to it enough, and they're like, this is just how life is. So once you lose the weight, you feel better. But during the time that you have that weight on you, for a lot of people, they feel totally fine. They go to the doctor's like, there's doctors that will pursue optimality with you. Like, look, this is unsustainable. Don't do this to yourself. But many doctors, I want to say most, like, as long as your fundamental current in the now blood work looks like not admissible to hospital yet, they're like, yeah. And they always say the same shit. I'm going to try to lose some weight. And they go, okay. And you leave the doctor's office, you go have McDonald's, and you forget about it. 2 years later, you come back to doctor, and you're totally fine. 15 years later, you go in, get some blood work, and they're like, you have like 3 different types of cancer. And you're like, huh, I didn't see that one coming. You should have, but you didn't.
And Mike, what is the mechanism by which obesity is unhealthy? How does that work?
Like, how long do you have? You know?
Well, I suppose what I'm asking is, I think we sometimes get very confused, and I think a lot of people just feel that obesity is mostly an appearance thing. So
Really?
I think a lot of people do feel that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I think that's partly because it's a way of putting that out, the reality out of your
of
mind.
course. Yeah.
And there's been times, by the way, just if people are watching, like, oh, these three people in normal shape, or it's like, fat people. There were times in my life when I was fat. And I think I was young at the time, but my concern was definitely not about the health implications.
Oh, of course.
Right.
Of course.
So, but how does it work? Why does being fat? Because the reason I ask this is, there have been cultures in history where being obese was considered attractive or at least desirable, particularly places where there's not been a lot of food availability.
Not our kind of modern obesity.
No, true.
Thickalicious.
Yes.
Massively obese.
Not so much. No, agreed.
There just weren't even people like
But
that.
the other thing is, carrying fat is a desirable thing from an evolutionary perspective.
To some
within a
degree,
certain
absolutely.
range, right?
100%.
So why is it bad for us?
Yeah. There's a bunch of reasons. One is it's actually being fat is quite bad, but getting fat is really bad because when you're getting fat, you're having excessive calories put into you. And it means the amount of fats and oftentimes carbohydrates in your blood gets really high. And high blood fats cause a lot of cardiovascular problems. They clog up the arteries, like in the literal sense many times. And then high degrees of carbohydrate in the blood sustainably both are directly deleterious to various structures, like having a high glucose amount in the blood vessels close to your eyes makes you go blind, all this other crazy shit. And also it causes you to slowly over time get really bad at managing the glucose, and it causes you to be diabetic. And then so that's one of the main ways in which obesity hurts you. But when you have lots of fat cells, there's another way in which it hurts you. The fat cells secrete a bunch of different hormones, and those hormones affect how the rest of your body works. Most of those effects are not good. Fat is not, we used to think fat was kind of like an inert tissue, like it just sat there and you put away calories into it and it just sat there. It has a ton of hormonal effects along axes of the rest of the body, and it really fucks you up in a bunch of ways. There's another way in which it's bad. High degrees, chronic high calorie loads, and being very, very obese, both cause a massive increase in total body systemic inflammation. And that low-grade chronic inflammation, for lack of a better term, I'm no medical doctor, just fucks everything up. And so all of those effects combined, and probably about 10 others I haven't mentioned, leads to obesity being real bad. So it's literally like, if you draw out a diagram, it's tons of different vectors from all places. Some of those vectors go to other causes and then they indirectly go in. And if the big circle in the middle is health, but it's just from all angles of attack, obesity is bad. I haven't even talked about the joint stuff you were referring to earlier. If you are very overweight, it ends up being, first of all, you have lower levels of physical activity almost always because it's just harder to move around. Lower physical activity by itself is very bad for your health. So that's already a big problem. And obviously the orthopedic concerns, when you have hips, especially knees, human ankles tend to be pretty good at what they do, so they don't often just snap. But people who have been overweight for a long time, also low in activity, their knees just go straight to hell. And like, we're getting there. We will be with AI getting to where joint replacements are super easy to do. But like, you guys know people who've gone through joint replacement surgery. It's not like you're not waving the flag after that shit. I can't wait to go skiing again.
No, I broke my arm. It's not something I want to do again.
100%.
So I imagine a joint replacement is a little bit more uncomfortable.
100%. And a part of what seems to cause either arthritis or arthritic-like ailments is the systemic inflammation. So if you have any proneness to arthritis, and you happen to be obese, you now have way more proneness for it. And if you have arthritis and you are obese and the doctor says, eat less, move more, you're like, move more, fuck that, that's not happening. And then eat less, you're like, where the hell am I gonna go? And then eat less is good advice in the technical sense of like, it's not wrong. But when people don't arm you with the advice of how to choose foods that can keep you full and at the same time can keep the calories nice and low and provide all the nutrition you need, just eat less turns into real shitty advice because you're like, okay, cut the McDonald's cheeseburger in half, eat that half. You're like, I'm still hungry. Okay, I'll start tomorrow and eat the other half. So a lot of times the kind of treatment people get at doctor's offices is phenomenal and super helpful. And a lot of times it's they're just kind of like, yeah, it's kind of stuff to watch out for. And the doctor checks his clock because there's 15 minutes left. There's 1 minute left with you, and he has this next patient 15 minutes. Off you go. I don't want to say I'm blaming doctors for this though, because doctors get a lot of shit. And in the comment section, no doubt there'll be horror stories about how terrible doctors are about nutrition. The thing is, for as long as I can remember, doctors almost always will tell you when your weight is out of the chart bounds and that you should control it and bring it back. Are they nutritionists? No. Have they ignored the problem of obesity? Absolutely not. Here's another fun, contentious thing. I love being on the show, by the way, because I could just say shit without, you guys won't get offended. And also, English people don't get offended at much. One of the big things that many people have been looking for in obesity and in health is one external cause to fucking just blame. Like seed oils, no offense, seed oils people, you guys are great. Artificial sweeteners, additives, big pharmas somewhere in there with their top hats and their canes doing something bad to children, I don't know. And if we can just blame this one thing and remove it, we can still eat whatever we want. We can just not have an exercise routine. We can not take care of our sleep health and all that Andrew Huberman shit. Stop scrolling on your phone, close your eyes, make a dark room, all that stuff, wake up on time. And because we've excised this one external factor, these aliens come down to Earth and they like do this scanning of our water. They're like, oh, you guys have hydrochloropeptide in here. And they get it out and everyone's like, whoop, they just like get healthy and awesome, hair grows back. The reality is the vast majority of the reason why people who become obese haven't reduced their obesity. There are many, many reasons. The vast majority of it is the giving a factor is just real low. People just don't care enough. And that's so weird to say because you're like blaming the victim. I don't know if there's any victims in obesity because like Cheetos are not like a gun with the smoke coming out. You're also holding the gun. That's kind of weird. But it's really strange position to have to tell people, it's not the poison in your water. It's not the fact that mega food corporations are like, oh man, if we just get everyone obese, then ... profit. I don't know how that works. It's the fact that when you go to the store and you're feeling like eating something tasty, you don't give a shit. And you buy the stuff that's tasty. And someone's like, what about the calories? And you're like, They've done a bunch of different studies. Actually, one in New York, New Jersey area, where they had calorie labels on fast food and then no calorie labels. Very good control. Almost no effect for almost everyone.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
That's so interesting because it does affect me. When I look at it, I'm like, okay, well, this is, if I eat this is like 2/3 of my daily intake. Maybe I shouldn't.
And look at how you look. Sexy.
Well, thank you. Although I'm scared now, but
good. It's helpful.
The point you made, though, I think about the food system, I can see logically how people make those conclusions because if people are fatter, they're going to eat more calories, and if they eat more calories, they spend more money on food, and therefore, do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do see what you're saying. I think that food company executives are not as strategic and Machiavellian and fourth order thinkers as people think. A lot of times the opposite is true, where they actually mostly look at like quarterly earnings reports. Right? That's how the real business world works at scale. And if you make a bunch of super awesome obesogenic food, people get fat, your corporation might not even be around in that next generation to profit off of that. As a matter of fact, if you think about economically, you're cross-subsidizing your competitors. Like your competitors could never want to make people fat. And they say, we don't want to make people fat. But then fat people still eat more food, so they get in and benefit off your shit, whereas you're paying the cost to make people fat. And then you also have to, I guess, sell to people again. It might not quite add up. What I think is happening is as simple as this. Food corporations try to sell you a bunch of different stuff. And some combination of things that are, for the average consumer, very reasonably priced, very delicious, end up people just buy them more. McDonald's and all the other restaurants and fast food have experimented with a bunch of different healthy menu options over the years. I mean, like dozens.
Yes.
And most of them have,
I remember when the salads came in, I've never seen anyone eat a salad in McDonald's.
Bro, like what is that even for? Because here's the thing, McDonald's and all these other systems, like these food systems, these restaurants, they're very evidence-based and very logical and have crazy supply chains. And they have like a stack in their menu. Like it's regional, but there's an average stack. There's like 20 items they can offer you. and their kitchen doesn't support the economics of 25 items. They could just, all of these are a waste, right? So if there's a stack of 20 items, they look at purely at ROI, like return on investment. So everything has a place in the stack. If you throw a fucking salad in there and it stacks out at like what would be number 40, like you're the salad division product manager and you go to the meeting with the boss like later that month. He's like, how are salads doing? You're like, well, according to the numbers, nobody gives a shit. He's like, what is he supposed to do? What is he supposed to lose his job to stand up for salad? Because if McDonald's quarterly earnings go down, they're going to look and be like, where can we save money? Like, oh, I know, nobody buys the salad. They're like, all right, Johnson, you got a promotion, no more salad. A lot of the healthy food at fast food restaurants is like super well-intentioned. Here's the thing. Capitalism. We're all capitalists here, yeah? Venezuelan, you love communism, right?
Yeah,
of course.
Yeah, well, it's a great way to lose weight.
It is even the zoo animals didn't have trouble until people started breaking in and eating them. You know about that? Like, during the more recent Venezuelan starvation episode, people were breaking into the zoo to eat the animals. It's like real fact. Yeah. Being from Russia.
That was a fun little interjection of just depressing historical realities.
I am Russian, right? It's all in there. The fundamental situation is food companies are just trying to do their best to give you whatever the hell it is you're going to buy. And because capitalism is accurately construed as greed motivated, greed in the best way, I think, for us, and if we were a little left of center, it'd be the most evil thing in the world. Greed motivates you to do anything to get the dollar, right? Anything. Which means that companies don't care to make you obese. And as a matter of fact, it's bad vibes for them to do anything to you that you won't like in the short term or the long term. McDonald's does not want the PR of people turning around and being like, you fucking poisoned me for 20 years. They don't want that shit. But what they want is money. And the easiest way for them to get money is to be like, hey, Francis, like, what do you really want? And you're like, number 5 with extra large fries. And they're like, what the fuck? What are we supposed to do? Not give him what he wants? It's our job as a corporation to do what this man wants. Give him the extra fries. And that's it. Like, that is my Occam's razor for why the food system is the way it is. Because most people don't give a shit. They just like tasty things. And also, I've been a personal trainer for a long time. I run a huge fitness company. I used to be a college professor for a long time, teaching people how to be personal trainers, talking to just like tons and tons of real people in the real world. And real people in the real world are beautiful, awesome, amazing in 50 different ways. But they just fundamentally, for the most part, don't give a shit about what goes in their bodies. You guys, let's walk around New York. You're going to look at people eating all kinds of stuff. You'll be like, have you really thought through this pretzel? They're like, what? Get out of hey, get out of here. You know, typical New Yorker shit. And like, if you can get people to give a shit, the food corporations will pivot as quickly as possible. McDonald's corporate, they so much as sniff out a health food phase. They got 10 candidate items and menus across the country the next month. It's McDonald's test kitchen. They're cooking up batches. They don't care. McDonald's in 2 years could be a health food store if mass amounts of global and American people demanded, in the economic sense of, I have the money and I'm willing to give it to you, so you give me this. Every company with Pepsi wouldn't make a single sugary beverage ever again. It would all be artificially sweetened. They don't care. Can you imagine like being in charge of PepsiCo and one of your interns is like, people are buying more diet soda and less sugar. They're like, you like take a drink of your scotch. You're like, my father didn't build this company to make sugar farmers bankrupt. Roll the regular sugar in. Like, they're gonna do that. They don't care. In the most sociopathic way, they don't care, but also in the coolest way, they don't care. They're gonna give you what you want. It just so happens to be that most Americans and people around the world, they just want cheaper food. They want it to be tasty. So for health food people watching this, if you make your health foods cheaper and you make them really tasty and they have lower calories and they make you really full, you're going to make a lot of money and you're going to help a ton of people. But the idea that like people are really health conscious and just trying their best when they just get fooled by these advertisements from megacorps, fuck in my face. Advertisements never made me eat McDonald's. It's that smell that you drive by and you're like, what the hell's in there? I want it all.
If you're someone who values free inquiry and independent thinking, which, let's be honest, is why you're probably watching Trigonometry, then our sponsor, Venice AI, is the tool for you. Here's a hot take. AI is exploding right now. But seriously, most of the tools out there are just clones with slightly different skins. Venice AI is different. It offers uncensored AI chat, images, and coding. Why should a team of programmers at these leading AI apps be the ones who get to decide what is and isn't okay for you to think? Whether you're researching topics that make other platforms nervous, or you're just sick of being told what you can and can't ask, Venice gives you the freedom to explore without limits. No political filtering, no condescending footnotes, just powerful AI, fast. We've tried it ourselves, and if you're someone who thinks about these things, you'll notice the difference immediately. If you want to use AI without fear of handing over your thoughts, ideas, or personal information to a corporation or the government, you can get 20% off a pro plan using our link, venice.ai/trigonometry. You'll find the link in the description of this episode, or type it in venice.ai/trigonometry and see what you've been missing. And now, back to the show.
It's a great point, and I'm actually really glad that you brought up the term big pharma, because when we come to America, we notice the suspicion around big pharma. Nobody ever goes, you know who is great? Big pharma. It's always like the
Awkward cocktail party banter.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just, and the moment people start getting a tad conspiratorial, which you love to do in this country, let's be fair.
Nonsense.
You drop in big pharma. So why the suspicion around big pharma? And what's really going on here?
Man, there are legitimate critiques of big pharma, most of them having to do with big pharma's cozy, though sometimes necessary, relationship with government and making various regulatory structures exceedingly complex so that little pharma can't compete. That serves big pharma well in the game theoretic locked-in landscape of like, well, we can't really deregulate. So if there are going to be regulators, we might as well grease them up to our advantage, which every industry does. Big anything means that the big players who got there earlier, the Pfizers, the et cetera, they have lawyers and other people in Washington, lobbyists, who are going to look at smaller upstart competitors and be like, can we get the legal system kind of to reflect that so those people don't like fuck up our profit stream? That happens for sure. We can blame big pharma for some of that. I happen to be from a very highly free market school of economic thought myself, for my dilettante bullshit pretend economics that I don't actually know. But I place most of the blame in the hands of government, because if you're going to have ultra powerful government with ultra heavy handed regulation, you as a major corporation can either go in there and be like, hey, do this, or you can just sit around and be like, we'll just be happily regulated by whoever goes in there and says that first. You know, like back in the Soviet days, I point to you as if you and I lived in like the 50s or some shit. Like if you weren't ratting people out, they was ratting you out. And so it's like, whoever gets the reins of communist power first, that's kind of who's there. So I don't blame the corporations as much as I do government for that, for sure. They do have some blame, 100%. And so some of that is, I think, rightfully assigned. And that concludes my anti-big pharma rant and begins my much more impassioned pro-big pharma rant. I may be one of the only people in the world, certainly who has like YouTube followers or whatever, that is like super pro-big pharma. I think everyone's actually pro-big pharma when the pressure is high enough. Like imagine going to the hospital and your arm bone is like out. You can see it, my man. Yeah. It's fun, right? You're like, oh, cool.
It wasn't out, but it was like that.
Oh, that's honestly even more disturbing when it's under the skin. You're like, that's not how my arm's supposed to look. And imagine you're like in agonizing pain. And the nurse is like, we're going to give you something for the pain. And you're like, hold on. Does big pharma make it? And she's like, yeah, man. Keep that shit out of my body. Dope, my man. It starts getting infected. And they're like, we have antibiotics for you. And you're like, big pharma again? Like, yes, that's correct, sir. You're like, nope. And then there you die in agony after hours and days of having ooze on your arm, and then it goes up through your brain, and then you die. No one's actually against big pharma when it comes down to it, because big pharma makes revolutionary medications that keep all of us not infected, free of pain when we need to be. Do they f up every now and again? Yeah, hell yeah, they screw up all the time. Like every fallible human institution.
Yeah, but I guess, Mike, the suspicion is for some people, and I think it's not unmerited, is, for example, what we saw during the pandemic, right? It's like, let's vaccinate the kids when everyone knows there's no point vaccinating kids against COVID, right? At least that was my perception. That was my view. So the sense that the profit motive drives them to overprescribe things.
Pharma doesn't prescribe anything, doctors do. And doctors do not directly profit from prescribing more medications. That is a huge myth. I know a ton of doctors. My wife's a medical doctor. There's not like you write a bunch of scripts and they're like, hey, good job this month. Here's money. That just straight up doesn't happen. The oversight for that is massive, by the way. Now, when your people coming to your patients want a lot of drugs, you can be a doctor that's like more like, hold on, let's wait and see how this evolves. You're like, how many antibiotics and pain pills do you need? If you had like a smoking gun of pharma really very massively influencing doctors to write more prescriptions, as far as I've seen, that's just almost, if not just completely, just not there. It's just not there.
What about the example I gave about, look, my view was that vaccines were massively overprescribed during the pandemic to loads of people who didn't need them. Did you think that's an unfair take?
I think it's a fair take. I think most of the people who in the public health space wanted everyone to have a vaccine weren't so much concerned about everyone needing the vaccine. They were concerned about spreading. And so Junior comes home from elementary school, he's fine, but he coughs on grandma and grandma croaks.
That, right?
There wasn't. But these people typically who are in the public health community, and let's just call it what it is, like leftist Karen women, they're like, come on, that's who shares all the pro-vaccine shit on Facebook. They're incredibly neurotic. And incredibly risk averse. And so if they say like, okay, one extra, you guys see this like advertisement bullshit, like even one life lost is a tragedy, which is so true. But also from a policy perspective, like you can't just think like that crazy. Because it's always trade-offs. Yeah. And it's like all of our freedoms, as long as to save everyone. No one really believes that, so we can get past that. I think those people are more concerned about getting everyone vaccinated so we could have completely crushed COVID out of existence, which was probably more likely than not at some point. But it turned out, vaccines were profoundly effective. Vaccines probably on aggregate, as far as I can tell, saved about 20 million lives around the world, which is like several Holocausts worth of lives.
Depends who you ask, Mike.
I guess. Well, in my view, it never happened anyway. Also, vaccines aren't real and birds are robots. Yeah, they just go down the whole wormhole. So yes, that's not a dependable unit to some. So vaccines are on net aggregate really, really good.
Yeah.
And I don't think that there was much push from big pharma to overprescribe vaccines. I think that PR-wise, big pharma can't afford emails to people that even hint at shit like that. One whistleblower gets out on an email that the Pfizer CEO is like, let's push these vaccines in a little bit of the wrong way. Dude, Pfizer stock, the whole thing goes. They have to be very, very easy about it. I've tried to talk to higher level pharma people, and it's basically like talking to James Bond. What do you do for a living? They're like, what do I not do? I got to get the fuck out of here. They're very not transparent, mostly because like everything is insanely litigious and there's a huge PR situation. Did a lot of Americans on the left want everyone forcibly vaccinated? Yes. You want someone to blame, I'd be blaming them first.
No, I'm happy blaming them.
They might have a little bit of blame. Yeah. I just don't think it's a huge factor.
So it's interesting to me because based on what you've described, you must, I can't imagine you'd be super aligned with what the current health government, the health department and RFK are talking about. That doesn't sound like, because he's talking about changing the food structure, which you don't seem to be too concerned about. And likewise with vaccines, I get a different sense from you.
I think vaccines are one of the pinnacle achievements of mankind. And if vaccines have side effects, which they do, and are sometimes deleterious, which they are, and they sometimes kill people, which they do. But what kills more people, COVID or any of the COVID vaccines? Well, the Russian Sputnik vaccine, who knows what the hell it did, right? And the Chinese vaccine that like people took but never did anything like that. Moderna, Pfizer, all the top tier US-based vaccines, they are like any drug, will save and help most people. Some people will have very mixed results. And a few people, though a few in a sample of 100, in a sample of the entire United States, we're talking about tens of thousands of people, will have very bad outcomes. But on the aggregate, vaccines are phenomenal. Should we be force vaccinating people? There's a very interesting discussion. There are ways in which that discussion turns into a yes. If there was a confirmed viral strain, that came out of India or some shit, that had a 50% on contact within 2 days death rate and a virality 10 times that of COVID, and someone in the US said, don't force vaccinations, I'd be like, I'm coming to your house. I'm going to go to India real quick. I'm going to cough on your bitch ass. The f*** out of here. State of emergency, flat out. During World War II, freedom of speech took a little bit of a hit because, like, you could be a fucking Nazi spy. We're fighting a global war. It's real. In the context of the real situation of COVID, in the context of most vaccines, I think the trade-off of giving government that much power versus the actual effect that you're going to modulate is much more in the direction of, let's not do mandatory forced anything. So I'm super, at the same time, aligned with not but more vaccine skeptical people on the limitations on government power. In almost all cases, except for super psychotic germ from India case, I'm super against mandatory kind of anything, really. For sure, mandatory vaccinations we had in Russia, actually. And my parents pulled my sister and I out of school that day because this is real fun for people who don't know. They would vaccinate children with the same needle. Okay, the same needle, not like the same syringe, but the cap. No, the same literal fucking needle. And this was like in the late 80s when AIDS was getting to be a real party. And so like that, yeah, shit like that is like bone chilling. Fuck all that. No thanks. But at the same time, should we be recognizing that vaccines are incredibly powerful and we should be aiming to make them better over time and more efficient and less deleterious? Yeah, 100%.
I guess what I'm asking is, are you excited or are you concerned about RFK being in charge of everything that's going on in this country with health? Or both at the same time, maybe?
I'm curious. I'm curious. I don't know what he's going to do. There's a kind of a term in kind of geopolitics war strategy of see what leaders do, not what they say. Because if you just looked at what people said, Trump would be like, what the hell? There's an actual leader. He does some good stuff, And so with like RFK, I kind of want to see what they kind of crap out. For me, I think on the aggregate, the new administration, especially Doge, I fuck with Doge so goddamn hard. Minimizing the size of government, cleaning out a ton of bureaucracy and waste, massively deregulating the economy. It's just like things that pretty much like economically, like objectively correct things to do that just a lot of people on the left have a lot of feelings about for some goddamn reason. I think that's so wonderful that the inclusion of RFK, who I think is genuinely a really, really good person who gives a shit and wants to help people in that administration, to me is kind of like, all right, let's see what he does. But if he comes out hard against vaccines, he's just going to be in the wrong. Hopefully it doesn't hurt a bunch of people. It's not likely that it will. If he comes after the food system, like they've been doing that for years anyway. It's not that it's going to do tons of damage. It's just like a lot of money spent towards something that has almost no effect. Where if you actually empowered, so here's how I would handle this whole thing. If I was RFK, I would just do all that cool Kennedy shit, Epstein's Island. First Epstein's Island. I need a refill for my soul and then work. The first thing, which Epstein's Island does work. I'll shut up. I stop. I have like a stack of 80 Epstein's Island jokes that just come in. You fellas have been to the island. You know how it is, right?
We're not that successful,
you massively overestimate our wealth and success, my friend.
I wanted to go. I got my application rejected. Try again next year. I would say massively deregulate the pharmaceutical industry. Massively. And have just one really easy law. If you are a consenting adult and your doctor approves a prescription, you can try any testing phase medication you want. Do you own your body or does the government own your body? Want to find out which one it is? Try to take a drug from a manufacturer that hasn't passed all stages of FDA trials yet. You're going to go to jail and stuff. But it's my body. And as a consenting adult with doctor's approval, if I can take a drug from any manufacturer, then it turns out I have really great results. They get a ton of data studying brave young people. I'm not young anymore. God damn it, where's my hair? So it's going to be a huge win-win. And then in addition to that, the deregulation of the space brings in a fuckload of competition and a ton of money, software money and shit like that. And then with AI, you have this incredible wave, which will happen anyway. It'll just happen a few years later with the current FDA, of insane innovation that makes medications orders of magnitude cheaper, more effective, and less side effect prone. That's the answer. More pharma, more technology, more intervention of the human body. That is the way to get pharma to do the right stuff. As far as overall US health, we have that one big problem. People like to eat a ton of high calorie, tasty shit. People like to eat it. How do you go about that? Imagine having a real drive policy-wise in the UK to get the motherfuckers up north to stop drinking fucking pints every night. What you gonna do? You're gonna be like, this has calories. He's gonna be like, oh, sweet. It's bad for you. Cool, everyone dies anyway. What you got left? At some point, you got to be like, you can't drink this anymore. It's illegal. We already know how prohibition works. It's not fun. Like back alley beer dealers. We don't want that shit again. As a free society in a free world, we have to understand that we have to try our best to help everybody. But at the same time, when people just kind of want to do their fucking shit and pay the cost health-wise, we just got to be like, that's just what they're going to do. And you can gingerly educate them, you can tell them, but heavy-handed government regulation, restructuring the food system, all this shit, it's some combination of doesn't work, wastes a lot of money, and just kind of antithetical to the principles of liberty, which is like, hey, you want to like eat French fry cigarettes and smoke them at the same time? Like, rock on, I'll light it for you. I don't think you should be doing that, but you're the one paying the cost, and freedom is a motherfucker, man.
Being sleep deprived messes with everything. Reaction time, memory, decision making, even your emotions. It's like walking around legally drunk, and the long-term effects, just as bad as smoking. Most people reach for melatonin, but here's the problem. Melatonin is a hormone, and most supplements give you doses 10 to 50 times higher than your body naturally produces. That's why you wake up groggy, your sleep gets worse over time, and your body stops making melatonin on its own. That's why I use Evening Being by Verso. It's melatonin-free using clinically studied ingredients to help you fall asleep faster, stay asleep longer, and get more deep-end REM sleep without messing with your hormones. I've been taking it myself, and honestly, I'm falling asleep faster and my mind actually switches off at night, which used to be a battle. Shut it, of course it did. Head to ver.so and use code TRIGGER to get 15% off your first order, or click the link in the description. That's ver.so, code TRIGGER. And I think there's one element that we haven't spoken about, which is the element of misinformation. And that I actually find it really worrying, Mike, when I'm in this country. And I talk to people and they bring up vaccines, and I try and be open because I'm very pro-vaccination. I think
careful, this guy's.
I have friends who are very vaccine skeptical. I don't mean the COVID vaccine. I mean vaccine skeptical.
Yeah.
And I don't have the language to win the argument.
Sure.
And I thought that what happened during the pandemic was bad, among other reasons, for that reason.
Yeah.
Because it discredited vaccines that do work, where the trade-offs are absolutely worth it.
100%.
And we've lost the language for it.
Hashtag trust the science.
No,
Yeah.
But that's a very important, and that's another part of it. But the thing that I find really worrying, Mike, and it's not even a topic of conversation because the study was discredited, and these are people, intelligent people we talk to, where they go, well, you know, the vaccines cause autism. And I'm like, what? Are we still having this conversation here?
Yeah.
And that's really worrying for me. And it's sad.
Yeah.
Because people are allowing misinformation to dictate the choices not only over their body, but over their children's bodies.
Is it true that there's no link between vaccines and autism?
Yes, like hasn't been debated in a generation. If you want to say there's a link between vaccines and autism, you have like an enormous hill to climb by just looking at, you know, you liked a girl back in middle school and you were trying to look for signs of how she interacted with you, that she likes you, and every sign is like she fucking hates you and you're a creep, but you're trying to like, but that one time she didn't yell at me too much. Maybe it's because she loves me. That's the uphill battle that like vaccine skeptics for the autism thing have. It's also a really weird random hill to die on, because if you said like, you know, certain kinds of vaccines cause various immune function abnormalities, like you have a few decent studies, 10 studies that say the other thing, but you got something. The autism thing was just like almost whole cloth. Like folks who have, like, here's the thing. If you have an autistic child, especially severely autistic, there's nothing I can say in a fucking podcast that's going to be charitable enough to how, even the words here are difficult to kind of calibrate, how big of a challenge you have. And how much of a necessity there may be for finding someone to blame. And I feel that 1,000%. That much resentment and anger is two things, 100% understandable, and occasionally vented at the wrong thing. And I think the vaccines thing was just super convenient. You know, it's like big crime happens and every criminal runs away and there's just some dupe on the corner, police show up like, who the f are you? And it's vaccines with autism. He's like, I was just having a Coke. They baton the shit out of him, drag him into the car. That's vaccines and autism.
Do we know, are cases of autism rising? And do we know why that is, if it is happening?
It's a complex issue. We know one of the predominant reasons, not the only reason, is increased awareness, increased use of proper diagnostic criteria. There's another thing with autism that's more curious. Jesus, you guys are dragging all the politically incorrect shit out of me. I swear to God, I'm getting
That's
canceled.
what we do.
Yeah.
Like you fiendishly smile, like, yes, yes, more.
We've slagged off fat people. I mean,
Yeah,
right, for
now
sure.
we're getting to the good shit.
Oh
Yeah.
boy. So there has been a recent, very profound rise of autism. I say mostly actually diagnoses, but even more claimed diagnoses, because there are a lot of folks that have a high degree of neuroticism, a high degree of social interaction phobia, mostly because either they are genetically just more prone to be introverted and a little bit neurotic, and or because growing up, they had negative socialization experiences with other children in middle school. You know, like middle school just really fucked you in the ass, for lack of a better term. Like you were awkward looking or something. I did not mean to look at you. There's only two of you. Who am I supposed to look at? You know, you just kind of had a bad time and it kind of made you go into your shell, you know? And that experience also of bullying and being physically intimidated makes you neurotic, makes you misinterpret or be very difficult with facial expressions. Like some people don't have the confidence to look someone in the eyes as they talk to them. If they've been beaten to shit enough and made fun of enough in their lives and they're already genetically more neurotic and more introverted, zero autism, by the way, they're perfectly fluid with humor, they understand every joke, they get offended. Here's the thing is autistic people just almost never really get offended because they don't really have a concept for how that works. You're like, hey, like, you don't belong here. They're like, okay. They just fuck off. You're like, okay. And so those folks that have been basically kind of bullied, had a bad time in childhood and are not super pro-social, even though they want to be and they can read all the signals, they have been both misdiagnosed lately a ton as autistic and have themselves self-diagnosed. There's almost like a bit of a pride with autistic diagnoses nowadays. Like
With all diagnoses now.
Oh, of course, yeah. Like you guys know the YouTube channel Jubilee.
No.
It's a great channel. They have like all the people come together and it's like one gay dude rates 20 people who claim to be gay. Are they gay or not? And then they find out later, everyone comes out, that sort of thing. And they had a bunch of them with autism and like who's autistic and who's not. And they had autistic people rate, which is extra hilarious because they're like, I can't figure this out for myself. And a lot of people, it seems like they really identify with like their grade on like autism type whatever, and it seems like this in community. There's also the Hollywood left thing made neurodivergent cool. I fucking can't stand that term because all neurological and psychological qualities are rather normally distributed. There's no such thing as the average person. It's a statistical abstraction. It's like everyone's different. And so like say I'm neurodivergent. It's like, well, neurodivergent how? Like I don't score as neurodivergent on any test, but I'm a weird fucking asshole. And you're like, that guy's definitely something. Everyone's something. So the whole term of neurodivergence has by some people in the sort of Hollywood peripheral left, which obviously spreads to a lot of the rest of the world, has been planted as the seed of like, hey, you're special somehow. And all these other things about yourself you don't really love, it's because of this one thing. But it's a cool thing and it's new and you're awesome and you're really like, I don't know, like Albert Einstein, because he was maybe sort of autistic, and all of a sudden they're like, yeah. And so actually autistic people, their levels may or may not be rising, but if they're rising, it's probably not very high and probably due mostly to actual diagnoses. Because you're like, you guys know, like we didn't have a term for autism back like 100 years ago. There were still autistic people. They were just labeled categories that I'm not allowed to say on public YouTube, like very bad words for people that are bad words because they used to be labeled for those. So better diagnostic criteria is most the explanation, but there is this other cohort of people that are either claiming to be autistic and they're not, or diagnosed by maybe not so diligent psychotherapists as autistic, when in reality, they're really just some combination of introverted and neurotic, and sometimes from genetic perspectives or variables, and other times just because they had a really bad time growing up. And like you get bullied your entire life. You don't look at people the same way. Jokes are awkward. Everything is uncomfortable. You do a lot of this stuff, and it has nothing to do with autism. And so those people, I think now some of those people have grouped themselves into autistic because it's kind of the new cool thing to do. A very similar thing has occurred with the trans situation. But that sucks. Yeah.
Well, no, we can't let him go on that.
Anti-trans advocate Mike Israetel, thank you so much.
Well, no. So I guess the real question I wanted to ask you before we wrap up, because we've been dancing around, is what's the answer at an individual level to the fact that we've never had this amount of incredibly tasty, available, cheap food ever? How do we deal with that?
2 answers. Great question. Number 1 is look into all of the new pharmaceuticals coming out because they're unbelievable. It's probably true to say that the modern weight loss drugs, you guys have heard of Ozempic and all that stuff. It's probably true to say that it's better for most people to be taking it than not taking it. It's damn near a health elixir. I'm not kidding. I'll get a lot of shit for that.
Come on, that's not typical, let's be honest, right? Usually, you mentioned yourself, there's trade-offs with everything.
There are trade-offs with Ozempic. There are trade-offs with tirzepatide. A new drug coming out soon called retatrutide has trade-offs as well.
Yeah.
But actually, the trade-offs are diminishing and the positive effects are escalating. And so the trade-offs do exist, but they're massively in the positive favor.
If you're obese or just for everyone?
Especially if you're obese, but maybe low doses for most people.
Okay, that's great. That sounds great. So tell us more about that.
Yeah. So if you look through the literature on the effects of these drugs, the primary way by which most of them work is they just reduce your food consumption, so you lose weight, and then the weight loss kicks off tons of health benefits. But it turns out these drugs have profound anti-inflammatory effects, psychological effects where they actually make you calmer. They reduce all kinds of noise in your head, not just food noise, and can make you less addiction prone. A lot of people quit smoking on these drugs just because they didn't feel like smoking anymore. And tons of benefits. They're still finding every few months more and more benefits of these drugs. The costs are pretty well known and pretty well understood. Some GI stuff if you take it wrong. Some people it just doesn't meld with. Some people actually have increased probability of having depression after taking these drugs. That's a little bit more complex because sometimes they kind of the only happy thing in their lives is tasty food, and the food just doesn't taste the same anymore, and so that happens. But on aggregate, these drugs are super special and magical because they seem to be net beneficial for most people, and especially for people that are overweight. There's new drugs coming out all the time. I would say look into them if you're trying to lose weight because, they were designed to help you and they're really awesome. Use them. That's part 1. Part 2 is you might consider getting a little bit of an education about how nutrition works, about how physical fitness works. But the best place to get an education for that now is my YouTube channel. No, I'm kidding. Also, that's fine if you like really weird humor and bald people. Just talk to any AI. I would say Google Gemini is probably the worst because it's so filtered by social justice warriors that it's actually not even that smart. I use ChatGPT from OpenAI. I think it's like drinking from an infinite well of knowledge. It's the greatest thing that ever happened. Grok, Elon's shit, is awesome. You just talk to GPTs and ask them, what should I be eating and how should I be working out in order to get some decent results and help me now that I'm taking this medication? It's going to hook you up like crazy. And so, yes, take the medications. They're amazing. But also, if you really want to make a change, you're not ducking personal responsibility. It's just not going to happen. Figure out what you need to know, hire a personal trainer, go look at some websites, download some fitness apps, and make a commitment to yourself to say, I'm going to do this thing. And it's not always going to be fun. But putting my pants on in the morning isn't fun. I want to walk around with my dick out. Again, the authorities continue to tell me that's misunderstanding. It's bad. You're going to have to do some not so fun stuff, but you're going to pay it forward because years and months even later, you're going to look better, you're going to feel better, you're going to be healthier. So yes, Big Pharma is awesome, and it's super, super great that it's coming. In a few years, there'll be even better drugs. Drugs for muscle building are on the horizon. They're already in testing. Wonderful stuff. Yes to Big Pharma, but a lot of people have this Big Pharma versus individual responsibility. It's both. Yes, you can take the drugs and you can go to the store and instead of getting a bag of Cheetos, you can get a bag of apples. I know the apples kind of suck. You want to look good, feel good, you'd eat the apples for a few months, you feel much better. A few Cheetos here and there, a few apples. You're in a state of balance. Everything is going really well.
Before Mike answers a final question, at the end of the interview, make sure you click the link in the description, head to our Substack, where you'll see this. What advice would you give someone for the simplest route to breaking poor eating and exercise habit cycles?
How is training for strength gains different than training for size gains?
Now, this is a nice surprise. I'm a great fan of Dr. Mike. I hope he talks Francis into getting on the T.
Oh, jeez.
Mike, what a pleasure it has been having you on the show. Final question, always the same. What's the one thing we're not talking about that we really should be?
Oh, geez. The coming, I guess I'll keep it related, the coming era of wonder drugs is already upon us with these drugs. And
He's not talking about fentanyl, because that's already there.
well, so my favorite drug, and it needs to be Chinese. I need the good shit, you know. I don't need none of this fake stuff. So, there's recently a pain drug that works locally and not systemically, or so it works on the peripheral nerves and not the brain, and it has similar analgesic pain reduction effects to all the crazy narcotics, but zero of the addictive effects. There's actually no mechanism for you to be addicted to it. It has almost zero side effects. So wonder drugs are coming for pain. And the idea that people used to use pain drugs and then ruin their whole lives from abuse, that is going to be something we look on in probably about 10 years and go, holy shit, we used to feed these to people? This is crazy. Drugs, so AI-powered drug discovery is just getting started, and it's going to lead to drugs that do crazy things, exercise mimetics. So you take a pill and almost every part of your body responds as if you were exercising for 2 hours a day. Like muscle drugs to help you build muscle. No, why did you look at me like that? Those judging eyes. You build up your muscle a little bit. There'll be drugs for cosmetic effects to tighten up your skin, to make you more look youthful. There's going to be drugs for almost every amazing thing that you can't imagine are coming, because AI could understand things we're barely capable of comprehending and making drugs for them with huge positive effects, very tiny negatives. I think preparing people for a world in which drugs aren't this thing. They're like, I should be taking fewer of them, and are more this thing of like, well, are there any drugs that are going to help me achieve what I want that are safe and effective? Looking at it more of as a tool and a utility belt rather than this forbidden thing we shouldn't be taking. Clearly in the 1980s, anti-drug stuff, propaganda failed with me. But I think that kind of stuff is going to be here. The good news is we don't have to be talking about it, because when the amazing drugs come out and all your friends are on them, you're just going to take them and you're going to be like, this is sweet. But better to get to it earlier than later, I guess.
Mike, an absolute pleasure. Join us on Substack where we carry on the conversations and we're going to find out the truth about vaccines and RFK. Zafer asks a great question. How is training for strength gains different than training for size gains?
Good question. There are two big differences.